Next, on Currents News, ticker tape treatment from doctors to doormen and police to postal workers. The epicenter, once again, a canyon of heroes.
Thousands of essential workers recognized for their bravery, some of them members of the Diocese of Brooklyn. They provided much needed support during the pandemic. I'm Emily Druby, and this is Ahead.
But some didn't make the march. They say parades are nice, but fair contracts would be even nicer. Then, finally, by a margin so slim, we have a winner in the Democratic primary for mayor. Can Eric Adams lead the city into recovery? And the Holy Father's health. But is it the media who has a fever?
We have no basis to think that we are in a crisis.
Plus, Rosita's rosaries. For a century, they've been in the palm of her hand. The news starts right now. That's the sound of redemption for the countless hometown heroes who carried New York City through the darkest days of the pandemic. Today is their moment in the sun. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. Confetti flew as frontline workers walked tall after a long battle against COVID. The pandemic made so many weak, but now the city is coming back strong and celebrating those who risked their own lives to save others, while also remembering everyone we lost. Emily Druby is standing by on the Canyon of Heroes. Emily.
Oh, Christine, what an incredible day. Now the parade, as you can see, is over, but I'm still covered in a lot of that ticker tape. I just cannot get it off of me. There was an overwhelming sense of relief. The people marching here had a really traumatic year, and it was just a moment to take a step back and celebrate everything they did. And we saw it all. Tears, smiles, cheers of joy. However, not all heroes were here. Some said this wasn't the celebration they deserved.
Look at her! Oh, she makes me cry.
They call her the First Lady of the COVID-19 vaccine.
Thank you, New York.
Sandra Lindsay, the Grand Marshal of the New York City Hometown Heroes Ticker Tape Parade, the first person in America to receive the life-saving COVID vaccine. Following closely behind, Michelle Chester, the woman who gave her the shot.
We've accomplished so much, still more to go, but it's a proud moment, and I'm proud of each and every individual standing here.
Sandra, a hero to many.
Because she showed bravery. She took the shot, being the very first one.
Other grateful New Yorkers filled the sidewalk, confetti filled the sky, and essential workers filled the Canyon of Heroes. With her son by her side and her cross close to her heart, Catholic nurse Katie says the pandemic will forever define her career.
It was really, really hard. The things that I saw, I think, is like traumatizing, probably for the rest of my life.
But thousands, including paramedics, EMTs, and firefighters, boycotted the celebration. Instead of a parade, what they want: fair pay and better treatment by the city. Eric Adams, the new Democratic candidate for mayor of New York City, addressed their position.
We have to deal with pay equity, and they decided to boycott. I respect that. That's what's great about this city.
For some, this was a time to take a stand. For others, this was a moment to let loose after a tense year. The Diocese of Brooklyn had a strong presence at the parade, including Vincent Levien and members of the Emergency Task Force. They were front and center, honored for their frontline work.
To be with heroes that risked their life, we were honored to help save lives, and we're honored to be on New York Presbyterian's float.
Like the Emergency Task Force, Somos Community Care also gets their drive to help others from their faith.
If I didn't have the faith that I have, I don't think I would have been here. Every night when I had doubts, I will go in and I will pray.
Christine, it was such a joyous day, but the closing ceremony of this parade was canceled because of the heat, and I have to tell you, it is absolutely sweltering out here. But I will say, I think that people were so happy to finally just all be together again that they didn't even notice. In Lower Manhattan, Emily Druby, Currents News. Back to you, Christine.
Emily, you mentioned that heat. What were the crowds like along the route? Did it have any effect?
Yeah, Christine, it was still pretty packed, noticeably less so than some of the other ticker type celebrations I've been to. But remember, not everyone is back in their offices yet. It was really hot. In terms of heat, the city did make sure to have cooling stations and water bottle stations for the people who did come out. And for the first time in a long time, there was no pandemic restrictions on this event. Anyone could watch. People were maskless. It really felt like we're winning this battle with COVID-19. Christine.
All right, thanks, Emily. You can go cool down now. Today's anonymous heroes are joining the ranks of a select few who have been showered with the city's confetti. In the last century, New York has hosted more than 200 ticker tape parades. But what exactly are the tiny scraps, and how did the ticker tape treatment begin? Well, the very first parade was in October of 1886 during a dedication ceremony for Lady Liberty. Office workers had thrown ticker tape, thin strips of paper used for printing stock numbers and baseball scores, onto the parade goers below. And while the paper became obsolete in the 1960s, the tradition and all sorts of other confetti still lives on to honor heroes and legendary Americans. Other big news in the Big Apple, the city finally has a Democratic mayoral candidate. The Associated Press calling the race, with Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams earning the required 50% vote needed to win the bid. He beat former City Sanitation Commissioner Catherine Garcia by a little more than 1 percentage point. If elected, he would be the city's second black mayor. Following the news, Adams spoke about his plans leading up to Election Day.
I'm looking forward in the next few months to speak with some of the current mayors and former mayors to talk about how do we make sure we move our country forward. And I think the Democratic Party in particular, they're ready for real change for everyday working class Americans.
Eric Adams will face off against Republican candidate Curtis Sliwa this fall. Pope Francis continues to recover from surgery after having part of his colon removed to treat diverticulitis. Doctors have now removed his IV drip and he's eating regularly. The pontiff's progress is moving along at a, quote, satisfactory pace, according to the Vatican. Further examination confirmed the diverticulitis. He's expected to remain in the hospital until at least this Sunday. With his recovery on track, the Holy Father sent a tweet thanking his well-wishers, saying, "I am touched by the many caring messages received in these days. I thank everyone for their closeness and prayer." And although Pope Francis has been in the hospital since the weekend, there is no replacement or vice pope who can step in to take his place. He remains fully in charge as he recovers. It seems every pope has had a health issue. I mean, if you think about it, they're usually older men who might be prone to different medical issues. But as editor of Crux, John Allen, put it, it's the media that gets the fever. He joins us now. And look, John, when anyone hears the Pope is in the hospital, there's concern. But the media really gets carried away. Why do you think the Vatican is so tight-lipped when it comes to Pope Francis?
Well, it is striking, isn't it? I mean, if this were the President of the United States who had to have surgery, which is not implausible. I mean, Joe Biden is 78, Pope Francis is 84. The medical team would be holding twice daily press conferences from a platform in front of the hospital that would be carried live on every network in the country. They would stand there for 40 minutes taking detailed questions. It would all be incredibly transparent. Instead, the Vatican gives you these anodyne 3-line daily bulletins, which boil down to the Pope is fine, and that's all you get. Now, in part, that is because the Vatican has always contended that the details of the Pope's health are a matter of his private life, and frankly, they don't owe us an explanation. But in any event, you're right. What it does is create this vacuum in which, in the absence of hard information, what media organizations often fall back on is speculation. Well, what if this isn't the full story? What if it actually gets worse? What if the Pope is incapacitated? What if Martians abduct the Pope and suddenly he's captive of extraterrestrials? And it just sort of never is, does it, Christy?
So right, that's what's going to happen over the next few days if we don't get any updates for the media. But we've all heard, don't believe everything that you read. So what's your advice to the faithful who want to know how the Pope is doing?
We have no basis to think that we are in a crisis. And then secondly, I think the advice would be just bear in mind there's a little bit of media literacy that is required in a situation like this. You have to understand the dynamic. We are not being given much hard fact to work with. We do not have access to the people we would actually like to talk to, meaning the people treating the Holy Father. And in the absence of that, we are going to get carried away. Now, some of it is going to be entertaining. Some of it will be informational, but none of it is based on anything more than an elderly man having a fairly routine surgery and apparently responding quite well.
All right, so when Pope John Paul II was in the same hospital as Pope Francis, he would deliver his Sunday Angelus from the hospital window. Do you think Pope Francis will do the same?
Well, Christine, on the list of things the Vatican isn't telling us, that's in the mix. We have, of course, asked that question,
Right.
and what we're told is that as of yet, no decision has been made. We keep waiting for that moment when Francis at least comes to the window of his room and gives a little wave. You'll remember that every pope who's been hospitalized at the Gemelli has done that. Even that apparently is some kind of state secret. We don't know when or if that is going to happen. I think it is reasonable to expect that if Francis is not discharged prior to Sunday, that is, if he's not back at the Vatican, they might try to get him back to the Vatican to do it from the normal spot.
Okay.
But if that proves to be impossible, I would expect it would happen at the Gemelli.
All right, so we'll have to wait and see. John Allen, editor at Crux, thanks for the updates.
You're welcome.
Grave news out of Haiti. The country's president was assassinated at his own private residence in the middle of the night. According to the prime minister there, a group of unidentified gunmen stormed President Jovenel Moise's home around 1 a.m. Wednesday. Moise was fatally wounded in the attack. His wife was also shot. She is in critical but stable condition. Bishops in Haiti have been denouncing the instability and lack of security in the nation for months. Still, they expressed shock at the news. The head of the Diocese of Fort Liberté saying in response to the incident, although it is true that there was a lot of tension around the president, we could not have thought it would get to this point. There's a lot more news headed your way. The Biden administration cracking down on domestic terrorists. But who exactly can be called a terrorist? We ask an expert. And it's day 14 in the search for victims of that condo collapse, how Hurricane Elsa complicated their efforts. Plus, holy hands and a meaningful mission, how this 100-year-old Catholic spends her free time. It's now been 6 months since Trump supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. That deadly day led to Donald Trump's second impeachment and spurred a massive federal investigation. Since then, the Department of Justice has charged over 535 defendants from all 50 states. But they say they still need the public's help to identify 300 more who are believed to have committed violent acts. Nearly all were charged with entering or remaining in a restricted federal building or grounds. Others were charged with assaulting, resisting, or impeding officers. Some are likely to see jail time. Many have taken to calling these people domestic terrorists, and in response, the Biden administration has released the National Strategy for Countering Domestic Terrorism. The question now is that title fair, and does it fit the crime? Joining us now to explain the major shift in the country's approach to combating counterterrorism is Adam Roosevelt, U.S. Army veteran and security expert. And Adam, after years of targeting foreign terrorists, the Biden administration is focusing its attention on domestic terrorists. But there's a lot of confusion over the definition of domestic terrorism. How would you define it?
Well, Christine, it's good to be with you. And we're in an interesting time, as you know, with what's happening in the country following January 6th. You know, how I would define domestic terrorism in the U.S. context is it is U.S. citizens committing terrorist acts in their own country against their fellow citizens for whatever reason. It could be politically motivated, it could be personal, or it could even be religiously motivated, but it's U.S. citizens carrying out that terrorist activity in the homeland.
On its website, the FBI defines domestic terrorism as violent criminal acts committed by individuals and or groups to further ideological goals stemming from domestic influences, such as those of a political, religious, social, racial, or environmental nature. But that can include many activist organizations. It almost seems like anyone who opposes the government could be considered a terrorist. So how dangerous is it to expand what domestic terrorism is?
Christina, I think it's very dangerous to expand those definitions because we've all seen government overreach, and there's been historical cases like the PRISM case where we saw whistleblowers like Edward Snowden get involved because these surveillance programs were effectively being used by the government to expand their reach and oversight. So when we expose those definitions to more power to the federal government, it puts these citizens at risk because those privacy rights, those constitutional rights, those rights become a question of whether or not national security is more important than constitutional rights.
Absolutely. And there's actually going to be a trial this year from a 2006 case where 18 people who were part of animal and environmental rights groups were indicted as part of a conspiracy that caused millions of dollars in damages, but no deaths. At the time, they were considered national security threats. Does this case raise questions now about who should be labeled a terrorist?
I think it's very important to unpackage the reasons why these individuals would be labeled by the definition of a terrorist group. What was their intention? Did it really impact a national security interest? Did they intend to hurt citizens in the process? Did they intend to degrade what we consider critical infrastructure, take out grids in the process? So I think the Federal Bureau of Investigation needs to be exact in terms of their definitions, as well as working with the Department of Homeland Security. And again, every administration, Christine, has focused on some form of terrorism, whether it be domestic or foreign, but we've got to be very careful how we define this, focusing our energy in the homeland.
All right, really quickly, President Biden's plan includes hiring more intelligence analysts and screening government employees for ties to hate groups, but it doesn't address whether government should establish a domestic terrorism law, which is something Biden had called for during his campaign. What do you think of the plan?
Well, I think the plan is very basic. I think every administration, as I had mentioned, will always look toward a 3 to 4 point plan, focusing on information sharing and collaboration with law enforcement. We've seen that before. And it's just a shift away from foreign terrorism to domestic terrorism.
All right, Adam Roosevelt, U.S. Army veteran and security expert. Thanks for breaking it all down for us.
Thank you, Christine. My pleasure.
Turning now to Florida, where after storms, rescue crews are still searching through the rubble for any signs of life in Surfside. As of Wednesday, authorities discovered the remains of 10 more residents, bringing the death toll to 46. The Archbishop of Miami, Thomas Wensky, has been to the rubble. He spends each day praying for the families impacted by the tragedy.
People affected by this directly, the survivors, are going to have quite a long road ahead of them to get through their grief, and as they get through their grief to again resume their lives and with some hope, hopefully.
94 people are still unaccounted for. Search and rescue crews are holding out hope for survivors. Now that Hurricane Elsa has passed Surfside, it's setting its sights on the rest of the state. As Camila Bernal reports, the now tropical storm Elsa is on a path to pound northern Florida as it moves inland.
With maximum sustained winds of 65 miles per hour, Tropical Storm Elsa made landfall Wednesday morning.
Tropical storms, if they're slow moving, can flood worse than some fast moving ones.
The storm not scaring away some tourists to the Sunshine State.
It's still a vacation.
Elsa reached peak strength as a Category 1 hurricane Tuesday, but weakened before coming ashore. Still, authorities warn the storm can be dangerous.
Tornadoes, of course, are a continued concern, and they will be possible across Northeast Florida.
We could have flooding.
surf that people shouldn't be in out at our beaches.
Florida's North Gulf Coast experiencing heavy rain and power outages.
We have more than 10,000 restoration personnel prepared to respond to these outages as soon as it's safe to do so.
And now, as Elsa moves inland, more wind damage and flooding also possible.
We don't want people to get overconfident, be out in their cars and potentially driving into flooding. You could have down power lines with wind. There's a whole lot of possibilities that could happen in these storms.
Elsa impacting northern Florida, parts of Georgia, and the Carolinas. It's expected to continue along the mid-Atlantic coast and maybe even re-strengthen into a tropical storm in the northeast by Friday morning.
Our thoughts and prayers are with those that are currently experiencing the storm right now.
Camila Bernal, Currents News.
Still to come on Currents News, why this 100-year-old has spent decades stringing the decades of the rosary. It's a story 100 years in the making about a Queens woman who prays while she works and her work that helps others to pray. Jessica Easthope has the story of Rosita and her rosaries.
There are 59 beads in a rosary.
6 of these for the Our Fathers.
Rosita Lewis knows the breakdown by heart. After all, she's made hundreds.
I don't need any book to tell me that. I know the rosary, and I just keep doing it from my brain. This is precious blood.
It started more than 30 years ago, soon after she joined St. Teresa of Avila Parish. But this isn't Rosita's hobby. She says it's her calling. She's never said no to God or anyone who's asked for one.
Whoever asks me for a rosary, or whoever I think may need one, just give it to them with joy. The space between...
Each bead glides down this string. Rosita says every decade of the rosary has helped keep her alive for so many decades. She just celebrated her 100th birthday.
I have no other recreation, so I believe it's the rosary.
The rosary has become the center of Rosita's faith. She prays it 4 times a day. Over the years, she's sent handmade rosaries to Haiti, Jamaica, and her native Trinidad, hoping they help people connect with their faith.
Make sure it is tight.
Rosita makes her rosaries extra strong.
The knots.
And with every uniform knot, her faith has become unbreakable.
I believe firmly in my God. Anything he says, never doubt it.
Some rosaries she can make in minutes. Others take hours.
You may not succeed with the first one, but keep trying.
It's easier said than done.
In green. Green, yeah.
Rosita takes it one section at a time, the same way she's lived her life, one day at a time.
Sometimes I feel a kind of numbness, but still I can make the rosaries. I said maybe that's my mystery.
Each bead makes Rosita's rosaries complete, and each rosary helping her complete her life's mission. In Jamaica, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
What a beautiful story. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. We leave you tonight with a final salute to our anonymous hometown heroes. We may not know each of your names, but we will always remember your sacrifice.